Well, a warm welcome to you all. It's Tuesday, and we are here with you live. I'm JJ. I am a life coach, and I eat mostly meat since October 2022.
Oh, wow. We're getting a.
Hold on one second. We have new technology. You got it.
And I'm Eric, and I'm a novelist, and I've been eating carnivore basically since August to October of 20. With a few little journeys outside of carnivore and then journeys back in, but pretty consistent.
Yeah.
And I eat almost exclusively steak, eggs, and coffee. Although more recently, because of the holidays, there have been some extra.
And a little bit of bacon. You do bacon.
Yeah, and
some
bacon.
too.
Yeah, bacon
Yeah.
some days per week. And I've had great success with it, and I'm hoping to have more. And we're going to get into some details about that. But first, you have
So
a sample.
I probably made my husband crazy because moments before we were going live, I went down our half-mile driveway to the to the mailbox, and what was there but my limited edition apple pie carnivore bar. I'm so excited. I am so excited. So it is like I just opened it moments ago. And it did, yes.
We have to get our. How about now, Lisa?
Oh,
I'm guessing that's better.
I will wait. We're waiting to hear from you. I think I can hear us better.
Yeah, we were on the MacBook microphone, which is why the audio was coming back through it.
That makes sense. All right. So it came with this card right here. I'm supposed to do something like this, right? I can't get close enough. So it came with a card that says, now this is not strictly carnivore. It is called an apple pie bar. Okay. So it is not strict carnivore. It is still their pemmican recipe, but there's fruit added in the form of apples. And there's also honey added into this as well. So the complete ingredient list is grass-finished beef, grass-finished tallow, raw honey, organic raw apple, organic cinnamon, and organic nutmeg. And this is the first flavor that they've come out with here, other than the original barbecue and salt and honey. I mean, that's it. So this is the first foray into something even sweet. And I jumped right on it right away. They actually we have an affiliate link for them, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm all over this. Let me check this out. Each bar has 435 calories, 18 grams of protein, 35 grams of fat. And here's what most of you probably want to know: 12 total carbs from the honey and the apple.
That's like a week's worth of carbs.
I'm telling you, yeah, it is not for the die-hard carnivore zero carber.
No.
And it does have 3 grams of fiber if you're going to count that or not. But I'm excited about it. I like the carnivore bar. When I eat one, I usually only eat about half of a bar. So if I did that, it would be 6 grams of carbs. And I'm not super strict. But anyway, are you going to try some?
I'll try a little taste of it. I mean, that's not going to break the bank, is it? It's very strongly cinnamony apple smell.
Yeah, it smells like apple pie.
I can taste the faintest amount of cinnamony. It's like if you licked a candle at Yankee Candle, it might taste like that.
So you don't actually have experience with licking Yankee candles?
No. I would say that this tastes no different than any other carnivore bar whatsoever. It is very, very tallowy.
I prefer the carnivore bar more than Eric. Eric's not a huge fan he can see the case use for it. Is that right? Use case for it. But he's not a huge fan. I, on the other hand, like them quite a bit and eat them fairly regularly. I think this is amazing. But as you said, what?
I was doing the but.
Oh, but I mean, as you said, it is a carnivore bar. So it is sweeter than the other carnivore bars, in my opinion. I've had more than you. So it is sweeter than the honey or the barbecue honey, whatever that is. So it's sweeter than that. It definitely does have a bit of an apple cinnamon flavor, but it's all kind of muted. It's not a real hit you in the face like a McDonald's hot apple pie or something, right? Because it's not that type of a thing with all those
It smelled like it though.
Yeah.
But
So
I couldn't hardly taste it. So
I can taste it and I really like it a
so
lot.
we didn't mean to start off with a commercial, but it really isn't, because it's a unboxing, unveiling, taste test review.
It is. And you're like,
Yeah.
tastes like tallow. And I'm like, I like them. I like carnivore bars. And this is really a nice
But
addition.
we're using new streaming software that allows me to do this.
Oh, wow.
I've got
look
a
at
ticker.
that. And you didn't even know this was coming today.
No, I had no idea. I did this in the moment as you were unboxing it. I was like, hey, I can do the ticker.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, if you want to try it out, there's a link below and you can click on it and we get a little kickback from any sales that happen.
And I am actually excited. I was excited to try this flavor anyway and foray into the sweet carnivore bar. Sweet. Again, it's not, in normal terms, it's not a real sweet treat. And it's not a real hyper palatable apple pie type thing.
So Remington is saying, I'd never bought the carnivore bar before, so I didn't have anything to compare it to.
Yes.
I like the apple pie bar. It's subtle, not strong apple or cinnamon, and very smooth. So yeah, that is true. The texture is smooth.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, exactly. You said it better than I. And I'm excited that these came. We will be going out of town soon. So one of the great things about the carnivore bar is that they're easy to travel with. So I will definitely be packing a few of these.
And do you think Disney will allow us to take those on the ship?
They allow packaged foods.
Okay. So we are about to embark the day after tomorrow on a Disney cruise for a few nights.
Yep.
And while we expect to be able to remain reasonably carnivore, keto-ish during it, I plan to. Being able to supplement with something like that is actually really great.
Yeah, and to be able to get that fat to me, because that's the last cruise we went on. We did stay pretty carnivore, and with the exception of some salad here and there, and the problem was the fat, missing massive quantities of fat. For some reason, they just don't bring out a bunch of fat blobs and slabs of butter to chew on.
No. All
right.
right.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So the title of today's live was Eric's trigs / HDL and heart disease risk. I didn't mean it to imply it was Eric's heart disease risk, but I guess it's implied by these numbers. And so we're going to dive into that in a little bit of detail. I'm going to show you some graphs and I'm going to have a little bit of a conversation about it. But obviously this is a live. We're able and happy to see your comments.
Oh, yes.
To find out more about you, what your successes or failures or challenges with carnivore, ketovore have been. We can even endeavor to answer some questions if you have them. If I don't know the answer, I will say I don't know, or I'll make up something. And JJ will know the answer, or at least where to find it. And we're also just interested to know where you're from, where you're watching this from. So I am going to clear this. And you may have seen Dr. Berry or others show this chart. This is from a Women's Health Study Initiative, and it was actually kind of a reanalysis of the data from this very, very large study. I think it was like 50,000 subjects in it. And Timothy Noakes did a kind of a reanalysis, and he was just looking at their methodologies and their conclusions, and he felt like they what's the word I want to say? They remove some data in order to support what they wanted to find. But in that PDF that Noakes released of this study, there's this chart which he draws from all of that data, which is about the risk factors for heart disease. And you can see on the top, it's risk factors that are basically just kind of body level or habit level. And the bottom in the blue are biochemical markers. So these would be from like blood labs. And showing that, and one of the things that the carnivore community loves to see is LDL cholesterol's way down here, bottom on, in the bottom of the list with a hazard ratio of 1.3. That's significant, but it's nothing like these other ones at the top. And of course, the big one is type 2 diabetes, which has a hazard ratio of 10.71 times. That's huge.
Yeah.
Relative, compared to, worrying about cholesterol, getting the metabolism sorted out first makes way more sense.
Which, I'm going to jump on my little soapbox of, I just wish that we heard this information, that we were raised on this information, that we were doing, I know it seems like eventually doctors start doing fasting blood sugar on a person, but I mean, there's still fasting insulin is not a real common test. And so I just wish that this was the big red flag for everyone.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it is.
So I spent a lot of time with this chart today because it in some ways it confused me a little bit, because if you look at something like metabolic syndrome, and we know that metabolic syndrome is diagnosed based upon 5 different criteria. And I actually have that. I'm going to bring that up for you. So the criteria are abdominal obesity, elevated triglycerides, low HDL, elevated blood pressure, and elevated fasting blood glucose. And I guess the rule is if you have any 3 of these, you have metabolic syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked ChatGPT to put the thresholds in here for us. And so for men, a waist circumference of over 40 inches qualifies as obesity. Now, this is kind of a gross measure because if you're very tall versus very short, there's some variability there. Elevated triglycerides, their cutoff is greater than 150 milligrams per deciliter. For those of us in the carnivore realm, we would think, well, that's way too high.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the 100s would be considered too high. Low HDL for men below 40, for women below 50. And I didn't really understand why there was that distinction. But elevated blood pressure of 130 over 85 or higher. And I know Dr. Berry's done a couple of videos on you may not actually have high blood pressure because the standard of 120 over 80 might be a little too restrictive, and I don't remember if he said blood pressure medication salespeople want to keep lowering it so they can sell those meds.
I believe it has been lowered at some point in recent history. And also there's the method of taking it as well.
Exactly. Because if you walk into the office and sit down and the nurse grabs your blood pressure after you've just sat down, it's likely to be more elevated than it should be. And the doc might see that and say, oh, you've got high blood pressure. You need to be on a medicine immediately.
I love my doctor, my more functional doctor. And I went into his office some months ago now, and I was running late for some reason. And they took my blood pressure right away, and it was high. And I love him a lot, yet he was thinking it was caffeine induced because I came in carrying a cold brew coffee. And I'm like, no. I was late. I was in traffic, I was late, and I just walked in.
So no chance to sit quietly, rest,
no.
relax, bring your heart rate down. None of that.
No. So I when I was home, I did various experiments with and without caffeine, blah, blah, blah. I knew they'd be fine, and they were. So
this is why you have to
Yeah.
test at home anyway.
Yeah.
But and then elevated fasting blood glucose. I was actually surprised because I had always thought that this was actually A1C that was measured for this. And so to get every once in a while a fasting glucose over 100, depends on how far over, might not be a big deal for a carnivore, because sometimes we see our blood sugars a little
Yeah.
bit high, dawn effect or other reasons. But so that's anyway the cutoffs. So any three of those. Well, as we go back to this chart, you can see that blood pressure, hypertension, and obesity, which would be the waist circumference, are independent risk factors of their own. And down in biochemical, we see triglycerides. So 3 of those components, and they don't put HDL in here as a risk factor because it's generally considered as protective. But I suppose they could have shown low HDL was also a risk factor, which is all part of metabolic syndrome.
Okay.
You know what
All
I'm
right.
saying?
Yeah, you said the 3 components, and I wasn't sure what you were tying those to. So those are
So there's
3.
5 components and 3 of them are listed.
Got it.
Right?
Yep.
So when I was originally looking at this, I was thinking, well, maybe you could make a worksheet that someone could follow with this, and they could just check off the ones they have and kind of score themselves on their risk. But it really doesn't work that way because many of these overlap. And then I was thinking, well, there's also kind of a progression here, is that you don't go straight to type 2 diabetes. You actually tend to progress through obesity, hypertension, and those are folded into metabolic syndrome. And then you'd have blood sugar, which isn't on this list independently, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then you get eventually to type 2 diabetes if it's never brought under control. So we look at the biochemical stuff, and we're going to get into the trigs and HDL in a minute. This lipoprotein insulin resistance, I had to look into this because this is actually an assessment. It's a scored assessment, and it's based upon this. And you'll recognize these from the NMR profiles if you've ever had the fractional lipid panel done. I think Quest calls it the cardio IQ, and it'll show your very small LDLs and maybe medium LDLs and number of HDLs. And it'll also show whether you're pattern A or pattern B. And pattern A is supposedly the big fluffy LDLs that are less dangerous. And pattern B is the small, high number of pernicious inflammatory LDL. And so what this column over here on the right is saying is that an increased concentration is associated with insulin resistance. Whereas high density HDL, a decreased concentration, that is lower HDL, is associated with insulin resistance. So, and high triglycerides is associated with insulin resistance. So if we go back over here, triglycerides, which are shown separately, are actually folded into this measure. But this is a more
into the lipoprotein.
Into the insulin resistance calculation. Mm-hmm. It's a contributing to it. But look at the impact of this: a 6.4 times risk if you have a high L. What's it called? LPIR. If you have a high LPIR, it's the same as having metabolic syndrome in risk. Why? Because it's metabolic syndrome.
It is.
It's basically the biochemical marker looking at metabolic syndrome from a slightly different angle. And that's why it's very similar. So we are very familiar, if you listen to Dr. Attia and Dr. Tom Dayspring, who are in love with ApoB as the thing to look at and predict cardiovascular disease, and also the thing to squash with lipid lowering medications. And this is showing to have some risk associated with it. And down here, the inflammatory biomarkers, which I was actually surprised. I thought if you had a very high HSCRP, for instance, that would be a huge risk factor.
And why would you think that?
Because that's what we hear, is that if you have a lot of inflammation going on, that is setting up the environment within your cardiovascular, when your coronary arteries, for plaque development and then blockages.
Mm-hmm.
So still very interesting. It demotes LDL and ApoB greatly, and it focuses instead on the metabolism as a whole.
And if I'm remembering, that was the main point that Dr. Berry was making with this.
Probably, because that's the main point he always makes about everything. And it's why he talks about keto and carnivore all the time, is because it's metabolism at the root of all of it. And before you say anything, it says type 2 diabetes right here. Well, there's also this term we have now, type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's, which is what happens. This is the 21.4 year follow-up with these people. Well, at year 25 or 30, that's when the Alzheimer's starts to kick in for those individuals.
I was just going to say obesity being at a 4.3. I mean, that is way higher than LDL cholesterol as well. Just that factor, which is the low one on the chart there as far as the, metabolic signs or risk factors. So it's just interesting to me that, like, for instance, I know that there's even been a movement in clinics to be like, oh, do you even want to know what your weight is? Like, they don't even tell you your weight now. Do you want to know what it is? And I do get all the psychology behind that. And yet here it is way higher than the LDL marker. That's a risk factor.
All right. So
see, that's when I talk about something that's not in his agenda.
Well, no, I just don't want to I don't want us to get too far afield, because I want to make sure that this is even interesting. So we could just stop here.
Sorry, I'm not interesting.
No, I want to, this whole topic is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because we could just stop here and just talk about steaks and how we cook them, and that we just got some deer was delivered to us by a friend that we're going to cook up, and we'll show you some of that. I'm interested, so I'm going to talk about it some more.
I'm all for it, but
so
I will not take you off course anymore.
We like in the low carb communities, people love to talk about triglyceride to HDL ratio as being the predictive metric. And so I had been thinking about this a lot, because as I've talked about many times on this channel, I did not see my trigs to come way down, and I did not see my HDL go way up when I switched to carnivore. And it was a constant source of frustration for me. Is that true?
Yes, that's very true.
Well, I got to thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I should go look at those old results and just remind myself, refresh my memory to understand what actually happened. And so that is what I'm going to show you here. This goes back to July of 2023.
Let me just say, these are your numbers?
These are my numbers.
Okay.
These are my numbers. So in July of 2023, my HDL was 35. My triglycerides were 291, which gave me a ratio of 8.3.
And you had started loosely carnivore in
October of 2022. So October, November, December, January, March, April, May, June.
Yes, and I know you were being strict by May.
Yes,
Because you talked to
by May
me.
I had become more strict.
Yes. Okay. So this is a roughly 3 months into the strict.
Yeah,
And how many months was
8.
it? 8. Okay.
And then 2 months later, it was retested. HDL went up to 35. Trigs came down to 243. And I remember this because I was horrified by this 291 and this 35. And I felt totally betrayed by low carb because I was like, it doesn't make any sense. And I got this 243 and 38, and I did not really look back to see the previous number. I just knew that it was still 200 something, and I was still in the 30s with my HDL. So they were the same.
I was going to say, you would just say that's just.
They were the same in my mind.
Yeah, in the realm of
so
error and all that.
1, 2, 3, 4 months later, it's tested again, and my trigs are 200 and HDL is 40. That improves my ratio to 5, but that ratio is terrible. This is 5-alarm fire ratio. And I got that 200, and it's the same.
In your mind, it's all the same.
It's the same as 291 to me. It's into 200s. There is no difference. You could say there's a mathematical difference, but to me, same.
And 5 is still a 5-alarm fire.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So 2 months later, it's tested. Now understand, I do 3 times a year. I have an integrative doc who does these, but sometimes I just can't stand it and I go test myself. So I don't know which is which. So 2 months later, in March of 2024, it's a 203 and HDL is 43. It's the same. Now, am I going back at this point and looking at July of 2023? No, I'm not going back and looking at it because I just remember vaguely that it was in the 200s. So it's the same. Terrible. It's a disaster. My body is not responding to this at all. But this is the point that I do a week of logging all of my food, and we did a video about it.
Yes, we did.
And what I discovered was I was actually having a lot of dairy because I had discovered the carnivore wrap
with
bread, the flatbread,
cottage cheese.
with the cottage cheese. And so I eliminated dairy and I eliminated my artificial sweeteners. 2 months later, my trigs are 115 and my HDL is 50. And I remember going, this is noisy. Trigs are known to be noisy. And so I'm not really sure this is a real reading. And this HDL blip up to 50 doesn't feel right. Now there's no logic to that. There's no, what more can I say? There's no logic to it. But I feel like, well, I just need to give it more time anyway.
And it's still not great. I mean, it's not where you want it to be.
But look down here, you can barely see it. The ratio, trig to HDL ratio, has gone to 2.3. Remember, I started at 8.3 and it's now at 2.3. And I think, obviously the target's probably something like 1, but under 2 is pretty good. Flash forward some 4 months. In September, I have my blood taken again. Trigs are dead even at 115 and HDL has fallen a little bit to 44. And so my ratio has gotten a little worse. And so this is my last blood test result. And what this did to my memory of the situation was, that one back in May was an outlier. And I was right to be suspicious of it. But now that I've plotted this chart and look at it, I have a completely different interpretation of the whole history of my trigs and HDL on carnivore. It's obviously working. But appreciate July of 2023. And then we have July of 2024. And then we get into the late summer, early fall of September. It took a long time. And I started in 2022. So we're talking 2 years to get my trigs and HDL to this point. not 2 months, not 6 months,
90 days?
way more than that.
More than 90 months, even.
I don't even know. No.
90. Oh, no,
Not 90
months.
months.
Oh, I was thinking weeks.
Yeah, more than
90
weeks. Yeah, 90 months.
I can do that.
So what's going to happen when I have my blood draw? I'm going to do another one
Yeah, you've got one coming up.
in the end of this month sometime. I was actually going to have it done on Monday, but I was still recovering from a cold, and I was like, I don't think that's the time to do it. So I'm just extremely interested to see, will the trig improvement continue stalled, or will it to improve? What will happen with HDL? I'll let you know when I know. But to me, it was very interesting and exciting, and I had to go back to this chart to go, what was going on that it took so long for those indicators to change? Because we always hear that trigs are high because of a lot of carbs, because what happens is the blood sugar goes up, there's insulin resistance, insulin's having a hard time finding places to stuff this sugar. The liver is starting to harvest it and turns it into VLDL, which has got a ton of trigs in it. And so the liver is generating all those triglycerides and sending them into the bloodstream. And insulin can't pack those things away fast enough. And so you have elevated triglycerides. When you go carnivore, get rid of all the carbs, there's no excess blood sugar. Very rapidly, that's depleted, and there's no excess blood sugar for the liver to turn into triglycerides. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that would make sense. So why, when I eliminated carbs, did that not happen? Why, in fact, did my triglycerides, in fact, go way up? Well, there's a reason, in part, is that right before July of 2023, back in March of this year, I got a CAC score of 0. And I said, I think I'm going to drop my statin, because I was on it.
Mm-hmm.
So this shows a rebound effect of dropping a statin. But usually that's a very transitory thing, as I understand it. You can see a big spike in LDL and triglycerides in particular, because the statins, one of its roles is to suppress VLDL production. And that's why trigs go down when you're taking a statin, even if you're eating a Sad American diet.
So the liver stops that. Okay.
And so you stop taking it, and then the machinery fires back up to start creating VLDL like crazy. And it did. But unlike many others who have a transitory increase in trigs, I had a massive, large, long, slow decline. And in my effort to try to understand why that was happening, I had to come back and look at this and start thinking about metabolic syndrome and its components of obesity, high blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, blood sugar. That means insulin was high, and try to piece together a story or a narrative of why this might be. I'm not skilled enough to have confidence in my analysis, but I think that the answer is I probably had far more visceral fat than I ever thought I did. And it was, for whatever reason, not really wanting to be, what do you call that? Lipolysis? Burned.
Yeah.
And it took me, it was doing it in using fat stores. I was just putting a lot of triglycerides into the system, and I wasn't apparently just burning them like crazy with all of my activity. But what happened when I dropped the dairy and I got rid of that last bit of dairy carbs, I think it got my insulin down low enough where the insulin resistance of visceral fat was able to be overcome and finally release it.
Okay. So you had mentioned to me, you were coming across this revelation the last couple days.
Mm-hmm.
and this theory.
Yes.
Clearly a theory. But you had said that the different tissues of the body have differing levels of insulin resistance, basically, or insulin sensitivity.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that not every
Right.
cell has the same response to insulin. So
you're saying you had to get your insulin down low enough for your visceral fat.
yeah, I mean, that's a theory. Why
Yes.
would that affect triglycerides?
Yes, that's my next question.
Yeah. Don't know.
Oh, I thought you I thought you did. You said something about it today.
Well, there's something about visceral fat releases cytokines, and they have names like TNF alpha and my IL-6 or something. I can't remember what they all are, but their existence can increase triglycerides.
The cytokines.
Yeah. They're inflammatory, and there's something about some of their action, and I'm way out of my depth.
Yeah.
Can or increase triglycerides, or maybe it affects the ability to get that stuff off board. But they're inflammatory, and so obviously I had a lot of inflammations that had to be resolved over all of these months, very, very slowly, and probably would have been faster if I had got rid of dairy earlier. And I have re-added some small amounts occasionally, nothing like what I was doing before. But now this analysis is making me go, I wonder if I should be a little stricter on it.
So I think there are some really important points here. One being the length of time that it took for your body to do this amount of healing. And you're hoping for more because these numbers are still not where you'd like them to be.
No.
But so there's this it was a long period. If we have expectations that carnivore is going to cure us in 90 days or 6 months, that may not be the case. You did some diet tweaking that helped, it seems with the elimination of the dairy, elimination at that point. But really, I feel like this is a huge mindset win because you kept thinking that it just wasn't really working for you. You had some benefits, but it was still not working. And when you put it in this graph, you see that it is working. It's just not at the rate that you had expected.
Exactly. And because it didn't happen the rate that it's happened for other people, I felt like I either was doing something wrong or I had some genetic quirk that was going to prevent me from getting all of the benefits. And even now, we talked about my mindset about how I thought all of this progression here meant everything was the same.
Yeah.
Even though if I had looked at this trend, it would be a clear positive trend. Even now, I look at this and go, when I get this blood draw, I have no idea what numbers are going to come up, and I'm braced for everything to go the wrong direction. But I don't know why it would. I don't know why it would go the wrong direction, but that's just the psychology of someone who wants progress to be immediate and extreme and perfection in the results, but also, as I've talked many times about having health anxiety and having an unhealthy fixation on what these numbers represent as far as risk and danger for me in heart disease. So I recommend, if you have a history of these numbers, to graph them. And it was so fun. I could have done this in Excel easily. I just gave all of my numbers to ChatGPT and I said, generate me a table. It took some iteration, but it did a great job.
Well, and I want to say, don't minimize, the 291 to 243. Do the graph and don't be like, oh, but it's still in the 200s.
Right.
It's not a steep enough slope.
Well, it's that I have done a lot of triglyceride testing.
Yes.
And even to the point where I have a cardio check thing, the thing that Dave Feldman uses to do all his home lipid tests. I got one of those because I'm obsessed. And I was trying to figure out this problem.
Yeah.
And so I knew how noisy triglycerides are. You could test 10 minutes later and get a very different number. An hour later, a very different number. And so to me, going from 191 to 291 to 243, I felt like it's probably just in the margin of error of the test.
Mm-hmm.
It's only over a long period of time of seeing this progress that it becomes clear that it takes time to
We
heal.
have to look for trends, and it has to be trends over time.
So this is metabolic healing. This is a lot about the liver. I feel, and this is totally uninformed, but I feel like my statin use probably slowed my healing down because it's interfering with the liver figuring out what it needs to be doing because it's artificially quashing production. And so having that time where I dropped it and allowed this horror to happen, and my doctors saw this, and he was like,
yeah,
if you didn't have that 0 CAC score, we would be having a very different conversation right now. And so that having that patience to watch this happen was very helpful, because not that I would have changed probably what I was going to do anyway in that regard, but at least I didn't have the pressure of him saying, you've got to be getting back on something. So that's this topic.
And we wanted to bring it to you, we especially Eric, but his mind. And we have also heard from other viewers who are concerned about their numbers not doing what they want them to do, and especially early on in their carnivore journeys. So,
I mean, it's so crazy because like on Dr. Berry or Chafee, they'll say, test in 3 months or eat this way and test in 6 months. And for me, that's like just getting in your car at night with no headlights and just going 100 miles an hour and just hoping that you stay on the road. Testing in 3 months or 6 months just seems wildly irresponsible.
to wait that long. Yeah. And to be doing this possibly harmful diet.
Well, especially early on when you're just not totally convinced that it's safe.
Yeah.
Because it is a mind thing. You've got to get your mind around that it is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And if you're not convinced, well, I think part of the advice is don't test too early, because then bad things, and you'd probably be better off waiting a year and then getting really good numbers and going, oh, I guess it worked.
Well, I was going to say, and you mentioned, I mean, if the doctor looks at those numbers back in March of 2023, which he did, it's like, oh my gosh, let's get you a statin immediately.
So,
yeah. Vitamin P
is patience. I have 0. So Amy says, I love seeing this. And also says, I tested it 2 months and freaked out. But I mean, testing it 2 months to me makes total sense.
Oh yeah.
It's like, that's 60 days. It seems like, of course, the body's going to make a lot of adjustments during that period of time, and it will, but it won't necessarily be the adjustments that you want to see.
I remember I've mentioned this in one of our earlier videos that I saw the 2 Crazy Ketos talking at one point about their keto journey, and they do eat they eat meat-based, but add in keto chow and other things. And they said that they were noticing changes in healing 5 and 6 years into their keto journey. And I remember telling you that to hopefully bring you some hope. And yet it can also sort of be like,
do you know me at all?
Well, it can also sort of be a downer. Like, no, I want these instant results, right?
Well, just pretend you're me. Imagine what my response to your thing about the 5 years with the crazy.
Oh, I
keto
can't
diet.
do that right now.
You can't do it?
No, I can't get
It's
in that
easy.
head.
It's so easy.
What is it?
They're doing it wrong.
Oh yeah, that would be it. Yeah.
Because that's my.
I had other
my level of-
derogatory comments that
of
were in my
hubris.
head and I didn't want to say, but yes.
No, it's just I would just say 5 years. You're not doing it right.
Yeah.
But that's my weakness, not theirs.
Yeah. Yes. But I was mostly heartened by it because I do want to continue to see healing. So
Yeah, if you've seen long delayed improvements because you've been doing carnivore or keto a long time, let us know
mhm.
because we want to hear that either in the chat here or in the comments for the replay. I want to hear that most of all because I just need to have this lesson reaffirmed over and over and over and over.
Now, I've been talking a lot about Dr. Kiltz in recent videos because it's so funny. When I started, I was like, oh my gosh, Kiltz is a little far afield for me. Like, I want to hear the numbers and the facts and everything. And he's a little loosey-goosey with some things. I mean, he's got some very strong beliefs, but he's kind of loosey-goosey with some things. And more, I feel like I'm getting a little more Kiltzy and going, okay, maybe it's time for me to really not worry about any of my numbers, to just know that I'm feeling good and continue on, carnivore on. And he says too, he does occasionally have some ice cream and a salad and things. It's not the end of the world, but he doesn't want to apply any stress around the diet. That's his ultimate belief, I think, is don't add negative beliefs or stress to your world. And so I'm getting more and more around that. And this shows me that too. It's like, okay, let me just, yeah.
Well,
and I feel great. So trust that.
The integrative doctor runs a lot of tests.
Yeah. We can't just totally.
It's a lot of blood tubes.
Yeah.
And if you do a lot of tests, there's going to be the occasional number that's weird. It's in the red. And he'll look at it and go, huh. And not even necessarily draw a conclusion from it.
That's true.
He'll say, we'll do it again next time and see what it is. Because you can't just judge one test and one number as really having much meaning. But the problem is that one number in a red can worm into your brain and then you're worrying about it for 3 months. Well, that's what I do. Mm-hmm. You don't do that as much, but I will tend to keep thinking about it.
No, not as much as you. I do have concerns. I worry. I've talked on this channel about how I don't like my blood sugars trended up and my fasting insulin is trended up on carnivore. Don't like that. Just don't. But where you get into it is like, you think that's going to cause you to keel over next week. And I feel like I have time. I'm not going to keel over immediately. Maybe I'm too flazida. Yeah.
Well, and I don't know if I should talk about this a whole lot, but an insight into the mind of health anxiety is it doesn't just worry in an abstract way. It worries in very specific, seemingly well-reasoned connecting of dots of causation and probable futures. Mm-hmm. And so it can build almost a movie-like prediction of the future in the imagination of what bad things are going to happen and have to be endured. And that's the torture of it.
Yeah.
And so stopping that pattern is really difficult because the whole survival mechanism is at play in trying to protect the individual. So for those who have those issues, it is really difficult. And I wish I knew the way to get out of it, but I do know that being carnivore has gone a long way to helping me.
Yes, it has. It has gone a long way, not just by seeing these trends and things, not just by that and the health improvement, but the mental health improvement has been there. You still have the mental health anxiety or the health anxiety.
Yeah, it's never going to go away.
And
totally.
It's much better. Most days.
Let's see. Natalie says Kelly Hogan talks about losing more weight and seeing more improvement after several years into carnivore too. Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some of the videos where she talks about that because she was a Diet Coke drinker for a long time.
That's
and
true too.
She
yeah.
didn't believe it was a deal, and then she got rid of it, and I think it made a difference. Amy says, my husband is carnivore for 1 year now for IBS and anxiety. It has healed both issues. I suggested he checked his labs. He said no, because no matter what the labs are, he won't stop carnivore. Well, that's actually a pretty well-reasoned position.
Yeah, because I don't know. I don't know what type of diagnosis I'd have to get to stop carnivore because I feel so good. Like,
I can't imagine. And that would be a great question for the doctors. Is there a diagnosis of a patient that would indicate stopping carnivore?
Mhm.
And I'm talking specifically about the carnivore doctors.
Mhm.
Like, is there any? Maybe there is, but I don't know what it is.
I'm making something up completely here, but
Good. I love it when you do that.
say I got diagnosed with cancer. Okay. Some sort of cancer, some form. And it was recommended that I stop carnivore, obviously, because that's just ridiculous, and go on to more of a plant-based diet or even paleo. I would be like, wait a minute, I'm going to be going into cancer treatment, whatever that would look like, with lower energy, more brain fog, like worse hormonal balance. Making that diet change would like make me feel worse as I'm trying to deal with this illness.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
It's Dr. Seyfried, right?
Yes.
He's
yes.
the whole like low carb cancer fasting for chemo. All of that stuff is the way to do it, not the thing to not do.
Why wouldn't I want to go into any diagnosis at as high a percent as I can, 100%, 90%, rather than like cutting myself off at the knees by changing my diet?
I'd go harder and I'd do more fasting.
Well, I probably would. Yeah. I mean, this is totally just a hypothetical, but
I'd lean in it too harder.
But to go into an illness intentionally knowing that I'm putting myself at a disadvantage in how I feel seems crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway.
All right. Remington says, I had a PCP that freaked out about HDL being 62. I haven't been back since. My employer allows us to get our blood work done each year. Freaked out because it's too high or too low? I mean, I would love to have a 62.
Yeah, I actually would too. Mine runs around 54 and it just is always 54.
It's so funny because carnivores tend to get their blood labs and know their numbers of blood lab envy. I wish I had your trigs.
Yeah. And and mine could, here I go. It can be better. No, but it's always been 54. It's been right around there, pre-carnivore, post-carnivore. It just is 54. But I do also think that there's more healing coming my way with some things as well. However, as you mentioned the other day, I'm kind of at my, I'm kind of where I want to be. Yeah. So anything else is like the cherry on the sundae.
Even those with the tick bite meat allergy from the Lone Star tick are encouraged to continue. I did not know that.
I didn't know that either. Interesting.
I hope I don't get bit by that tick.
Oh my gosh, that would be bad. But I would eat chicken. I'd do whatever.
I'd find some meat, hopefully, that I could eat. Yeah. When I was on SAD, it was a miracle if I got an HDL above 40.
Jeez.
Yeah, that's mine has always been in the low 30s on any diet, but obviously carnivore, it's now eking its way into I got that 50, which is an outlier, but maybe it's not. Hopefully it's not. Maybe I get it back. The doctor said it was way too high. And another doctor told me there was nothing I could do to raise HDL when it was 40 or below. It's interesting, the sort of conventional wisdom that doctors sometimes just believe, or things they just say. I had a doctor tell me that two things that were interesting. He said that there's almost nothing you can do with diet that will help change your lipids, which is, that's just patently false. I I can show you this. Yeah, it can. It can also make your LDL go way up. I didn't show that on this. But he also said that stress isn't that big of a factor in heart disease.
Mm.
And I think that there's a lot more, I'm hearing a lot more talk about cortisol from stress and how it exacerbates all of the metabolic problems that people have. So if you have insulin resistance, obesity, high blood pressure, you have a lot of visceral fat, you add stress and cortisol into that, it just makes it way worse. It's an amplifier of bad inflammation. Chronic stress.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's nothing you can do. Yeah. That's one of the things I don't believe. And it's actually kind of a weakness, is always thinking there's some answer or some solution.
Yeah.
And then looking for it.
Which is what I told you after our last live. You had said you had mentioned that I'm sort of where I want to be. And it just took me aback for a second because I hadn't really thought that I've hit my results. Because I keep focusing on, but my blood sugar keeps going up. No. Like I've hit where I want to be, period. And so for that to not have that mental striving for the next thing it didn't even enter my mind that I could be there.
And now it has.
It was like, oh yeah, I think actually you're right. I'm doing really well. Yeah.
Amy's asking, is the fasting helping with the glucose levels?
Okay, so I don't have a nice chart or anything. So yes, it is in overall. What I find is that if I've been doing fasting most weeks, twice a week for a little while now. Some weeks it's once a week. And I think I missed Thanksgiving week altogether. But my numbers stay lower for about 48-ish hours after the fast. And then they'll start to creep up again. And again, these aren't horrible. It's just that I wake up they tend to hover around 100. I tend to have an average glucose around 100. And no major spikes or anything, but that's where it sits. And so it is helping. So I am able to have more time in the week where it's lowered blood sugar. So presumably lowered insulin as well. I have noticed my mood and energy is much like I feel great doing this protocol for the most part. Like I've up leveled, I feel like in life. So I think it's doing good things. And if I don't fast, it goes back up to an average glucose of 100. So it's not like it's at this moment permanently fixed. But what I am believing and choosing to believe is that by keeping it lower for more of the week, I am doing good things for my body. And I'm seeing mood and energy results that are ultimately why I'm doing it.
I am not fasting. I tried
once,
I did that one, and I don't know. It's just not where I'm at right now.
No. And I'm not, I don't, it's not where you're at right now. And I also, I feel like that might be an indication of more healing in some ways, because you are just hungry a lot.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And most carnivores are like, oh no, I can skip a meal, no problem. You're not like there at all. Although you only eat 2 meals a day. Let me say that. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you're snacking all day.
Not the same topic, but I went to the dentist today for a cleaning. Hygienist said the hard plaque isn't all that bad. I contributed this to being carnivore now.
Agreed.
Yeah, the tooth health on carnivore is easy.
I did not tell you this.
You haven't brushed your teeth in 3 months?
No, I have brushed my teeth. But I've mentioned before, my mom was in the dental industry, so we were very raised on really good dental hygiene. So I am actually a person who would floss every day. On carnivore, I noticed that the flossing wasn't really producing many results for me. So I've cut way back on flossing. which is again crazy town coming from my family and my background. But after Thanksgiving, so Thanksgiving came around, and as I said, I cook the meal. So I was eating a lot of mashed potato because I had to try it. Every day I was cooking a dish, and then we had it. So I was having a lot of things outside the realm. My gums, I flossed and they bled.
Oh,
And then they stopped. Like then a couple days later, they were stopped. But I think because what I've heard from the dentists who have been interviewed by carnivore or keto channels, I think it was inflammation from what I was eating, and a temporary inflammation. Like I don't think it was a hardcore, oh, I haven't been flossing, because I can floss at any time and not have any bleeding. But I think it was actually diet related, and that I was experiencing some inflammation from Thanksgiving.
Oh,
and
sure.
it was showing up in my gums. Crazy. And again, I'm sure some of you are like, yeah, you haven't been flossing regularly. No. I'm telling you, they don't bleed on carnivore. They don't need flossing on carnivore. But when I was loose for a couple weeks, issues, inflammation in my gums.
Well, I can't not floss because I like how it feels.
I agree. Like I get what you're coming from, but there was no difference for me. So
Well, it saved you time.
it does. And I've been flossing more regularly, but after that, but now I'm going to cut back again because there's no more inflammation.
Paul says butter is packaged and doesn't need refrigeration. And I'm not sure if this is in relation to our discussion about carnivore bar or something else, but it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our butter out. We have some soft butter out for soft butter use. And
Not on bread.
and some in the refrigerator just because it's convenient to put it there.
Yeah. Otherwise we'd have some. We have 1, 2, 3. We have 4 different types of butters. So yeah, having them all on the counter might be a little
not
crazy.
for bread. It's for, I think you smear it on the steak.
Yes, I do. Yeah. But it was so cute because we had people over for Thanksgiving and they helped clean up our kitchen and they put the butter all in the fridge.
Oh.
We used to do that.
Let's see. Natalie says, I'm trying a fluoride-free toothpaste. Not me too.
Yes.
I don't even know what it is. I don't know what brand it is. It's one you had.
Mm-hmm.
And it tastes minty and it gets my teeth clean. And they're not falling out yet. Remington, I switched over to FYGG toothpaste 2 weeks ago, fluoride-free. Did you see the Primal podcast with the California dentist?
Yes.
I did not.
I did. And that is, like I said, I've noticed the difference anyway. And that is why when I had that bleeding all of a sudden after Thanksgiving, I was like, oh, I think it's exactly what he's talking about. And I don't know the whole mechanism of it, but he does.
I did not see that,
Yeah.
but it doesn't sound like a topic I would probably click on.
No, I don't think you would.
So we are going to try to get a short video available for upload on Friday. It won't be live because we will be somewhere in the Caribbean on Disney cruise and not streaming. Believe that. But we're going to try to have something that we can upload that you can watch on Friday.
Yes.
And then we'll be back next Tuesday, and we'll probably be doing a live then because we'll have been gone and not shot any new video.
No, there will be no new video in the can. I don't. And even editing, you'd have to edit something, even if we did something. Yeah. And I don't think we should video with our daughter. She'd find that very annoying. But yes, before we leave though, tomorrow, I am making some chuck chili, one, so we can have a little bit, but also so I can leave it for the house sitter.
Mm-hmm.
And number 2, we're going to have that venison you were talking about. So I'm excited to.
Yeah. Venison harvested on this property.
Mm-hmm.
So we were gifted by the hunter some backstrap. So we're very excited to get to taste that for the first time. We understand it's a very choice cut. So we shall see.
Yes, we appreciate it.
All right. So we've been doing this with new streaming software. So I abandoned the old one because it made me so furious. this seems like it worked pretty well. We had some audio issues, but let us know in the replay comments or anything if there's any issues, if it looked good. But we're going to continue with this one unless we hear terrible, terrible things. And I think that's it. I think we've hit all the points we want to. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
You have nothing else to say?
Nope.
Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.